Our next speaker is Willi Tacke. He is the founder and organizer of the E-Flight-Expo at Aero and CEO of Flying Pages. He owns several publishing companies, including Flying Pages in Germany, Flying Pages Europe, and Flying Pages China. He founded Fluegel Magazine, the German aviation magazine, in 1992. He's been publishing the World Directory of Light Aviation since 1995. And he is fluent in English, French, German, and Chinese. He began his publishing career at the Swiss publishing house Ringier. He began working for aviation publications in 1983. Since 2009, he's been organizing the E-Flight-Expo at Aero Friedrichshafen. And he organized the world's first E-Flight show there in 2017. He's an aviation consultant for government and private aviation companies in Europe, the US, and China, with a focus on electric aviation, ultralight, light sport, and general aviation. He has a pilot instructor's license for hang glider, paraglider, and ultralight, and has had his private pilot's license since 1983. He has a degree from LMU Munich in political science and economics. And please welcome Willi Tacke.
Thank you, Jolanka, for the nice introduction. And I have to correct you in one thing. I'm not fluent in Chinese. I wish I would be. I'm publishing a Chinese magazine, but the only thing I can read there actually is mainly my word and at the editorial, which is in English, and the rest I have stuff doing this. So, and I think in this life I won't learn Chinese. It's just too complicated for me. Having this said, thank you all for coming here, because I know there are so many events going on in electric over the years. When we started the very first electric flight exhibition at Aero, there was just some people laughing and saying, yeah, electric flight, it's never going to come. You see, although the electric cars are not working, so what makes you think that electric flight could work? If you look, the world is just a little bit more. We just had 10 years anniversary. The world has changed a lot. Let's see. Yeah, that's. Jolanka just mentioned this. These are some of the publications I'm doing. This is actually what got me into electric flight. I had a chance in 2009 flying an electric aircraft in Shanghai, China, which was an American aircraft converted to electric. And it's so fascinating. If you've flown an electric aircraft yourself, you see why this is, I think, the future. I persuaded the people of Aerofair Friedrichshafen to do something in this direction, which they have done. And so since then, in the first years, there were quite a bit of cautious and said, yeah, but you know, we don't have people who do product there, so we don't make money in this, so shall we really do it? Over the years, it has boosted. We now have a full hangar, which is 6,000 square meters just with electric aircraft last year. We had the first electric shows. So this was one of the one where the Volocopter was presented, the new one, the V2, and several other electric aircraft. And for the first time, and this is something I will mention when we come later to the point of social acceptance, for the first time, the EU Commission of Transport did visit the General Aviation show, Aero, when we had, and she was coming and just looking for electric. She spent perhaps 20 minutes on conventional aircraft and 5 hours on electric. So this is a way also to get more support for aviation in general, because it's getting aviation green, and it's getting aviation more silent, and it's getting aviation into a field where new business models make sense. That's why Uber is there, that's why a lot of other large companies are there, and this is the next step why Siemens got into aviation, because they would never get into normal general aviation. We will hear later that they also changed their plan quite a bit. But they invested quite a lot of money over the last years, got an aerobatic aircraft, several aircraft, the motors for the Airbus, a hybrid aircraft, which they showed in 2018, flying there at the show. And we'll hear more about what is planned at the E-Flight show at the Aero later. In 2019, and that's what I'm now trying to wrap up a little bit, because up to now the presentation have been a little bit US-centered, I find. And we have to see, I know that Uber is working globally, but still a lot of the activities, you can see that 2 of your first initial cities are in the United States. And a lot of the companies are in the United States, but there is more going on around the world. And some of the companies has been mentioned, like Volocopter, like Lilium. They are based out of Europe, and there are several other countries where are. And one interesting thing is, I just was about, at the beginning of this month, I was invited to South Africa. Because Aero has a partner fair there, and they invited me to speak about electric aviation. I was thinking, they just start with aviation, and I was surprised. The show was quite good. There were quite a lot of aviation people, so they have an aviation culture. And when I finished my presentation, several people came to the stage, and actually 2 of them were working on eVTOL project, where one of it will fly this year. And the other one is also, it's a larger project, and they are based out of South Africa, and I didn't know about it. So there is going more on at the world at the moment than we see if you always move in the same circles, because a lot of you, I see them on a regular basis, on the regular same events, but this made me think and realize there is more going on. There is also one thing which is interesting, which we had this time for the first time at Aero, because we need more than just the vehicles. We talked a lot about the vehicles, how the vehicles have to be designed. And just by, let's say, some side items, we mentioned, yeah, and they have to be regulation, and they have to be infrastructure. But without these side items, this will never work. And so the side items there at Aero, we had somebody of Huawei, because they have a huge research facility in Europe with 2,600 engineers all over Europe working on new G5 and other technologies. They are very much involved in autonomous driving, and they are very interested in electric and autonomous flying. So they are already having some operations with Chinese companies in China, and they will be involved in facilities in Germany where there will be try-out areas for autonomous flying. Because if we fly autonomous, even if the vehicle is autonomous, we want to know where they are. So we need something like G5, because the existing transponders, ASDB, they will not work for controlling the amount of vehicles we want to control. And for this, it was very interesting talking with them, when we talked with them and the folks of Gamma, what would be needed. And then they said, yeah, with the car industry, they said, okay, we need a maximum speed of 500 kilometers per hour. And I was wondering, which car is driving that fast? And they said, no, for aviation, it will be even over 1,000, because you have one vehicle coming from the left, the other vehicle coming from the right, so the resuming speed is double of it. So we need more. The systems has to be adapted to this speed. And this they don't do at the moment, because there was no requirement. So this is something we have to speak with the people right now, if we want that the systems will be ready when the aircraft will be ready. And especially as the G5 networks are set up right now, if you don't talk with them right now, it will be very difficult in the future, when they once have installed systems, to remodify the whole system. There are a lot of shows, you see, where I am getting around, like after Aero this year. At Paris Airshow, we had the world premiere of Eviation, of the Eviation Elise. And this is also something, right? From the talking we had up to now, most of the talking is on VTOL, eVTOL. That's a big hype. But there are other fields where electric aviation can bring a lot of benefit for general aviation, for aviation in general. And this Eviation company is really fascinating. If you looked at this aircraft, and it's not a mock-up, the prototype, which they showed there at the show, and the company was just founded 5 years ago, and I'm in aviation since 1980. If you know how long normally aviation projects of this size take, from the first scratch until you have a prototype there which should fly this year, it's much, much longer. So this is changing a lot of the paradigms in aviation. And they are very similar to the approach of Uber. They say, okay, we want to be full electric. We don't want to be hybrid. There are perhaps some working cases with hybrid which will work, but we think full electric is what we want. And with our very efficient aircraft, we can fly up to 1,000 kilometers. So if we fly 1,000 kilometers, then we have a lot of customers which would like this, and so they have their first launch custom Cape Air, who want to operate the vehicles, who has ordered vehicles, and up to now they kept their timeline. So I'm really looking forward to having this aircraft flying by the end of this year, beginning of next year. And Omar, the CEO, promised us if we are flying at the end of next year and if the next prototype is ready, then perhaps we're going to fly it at Aero, Friedrichshafen. So if it's, then you should come and have a look at it. So it's not only eVTOL, there are more things in electric aviation which are there, and probably they will be much easier to achieve. Why? Because they said this aircraft, it's 90% can be certified with the existing Part 23 rules. So you don't have to rewrite rules. You don't have to rewrite operation rules. You don't have to do special pilot training, because all things which we have to do for eVTOLs. So this probably we will see much more likely to operate. And I think it's very good also for the eVTOL sector, because with this, the certification bodies can learn how they have to certify an electric aircraft. Because when we hear now and talking about eVTOL, we're talking, there is this and that, but that you fly with 1,500 volts inside a cockpit. There are some, I think, just align this factor. If you would have gone to a certification operation like FAA or EASA years ago, that would take 10 to 15 years that we think about it, how we could do this. They have changed, but still there are a lot of challenges, and the sooner we get the most possible electric aircraft in the air, the better it is for the whole community. So about the world premiere, now I'm getting a little bit to what I'm doing. So because I have only limited time to speak here, you've seen this E-Flight journal laying around here. You also can read it at the website, or you can download it, and you'll see the information which we collect when we travel around the world. And at the latest time, it's mainly electric aviation. Another premiere, which happened at the show in Paris, which was not so much noticed because there was a big hype on the Eviation release, but there was the Electro Alpha training aircraft, which is in serial production, 50 aircraft per year, and they flew at the show every single day. So they had a normal operation, like a normal aircraft. They went out, they did fly, they come down. So electric aviation is getting into standard, that standard people can operate them, which is good. Then we have one thing, probably all of you heard about it, and we still have to see how this will influence the market, because one of the pushing forces, at least in Europe, and the last years was Siemens e-aircraft. They invested quite a lot of money, they've done a lot of research, they developed different kind of engines, and now it becomes Rolls-Royce, because the e-aircraft was taken over by Rolls-Royce. But in a way this makes sense, because from the beginning Siemens said we also deliver our motors for people who want to do full electric, but we believe our use case for larger aircraft will only work until 2030 with hybrid. So they need something which is producing the energy for the hybrid. But Siemens is not making any turbines which you would need in this kind of aircraft. So Siemens would just produce one part of it. So at this point, Rolls-Royce becomes, so either Siemens would have to buy some turbine company, or in this case, Rolls-Royce, who committed to work on these hybrid solutions, that, okay, it makes sense to buy the technology and to accelerate our working process. And for the whole system of the motors produced by Siemens, it makes a lot of sense that because Siemens, they would have to build up DOI, POI, like design organization, production organization. Rolls-Royce has all this. So for certifying the electric motors and the hybrid systems, probably this will accelerate the process and will help to get aircraft sooner in the air. There have been several other aircraft there, and I think I have to accelerate a little bit because I don't want to run out of time. There was like the Volta Aero, which is a modified Cessna 337, and they have actually 5 electric motors on board, like 1 on each wing, and 3 motors coupled with a combustion engine in the tail of the aircraft, which is quite an interesting approach. And the same aircraft has also been used by Ampere, although they have this nice looking design, which is their future aircraft. But the first aircraft they had been flying this year, and you probably all have heard about this, is also based on a Cessna 337. But they keep the conventional setup with 1 push, 1 pull motor, just replace 1 by electric, which gives you the safety that in we heard about before. Safety is redundancy, and though you have the electric system, but you still have a running combustion engine. So if anything fails with the electric system, you still can fly and land the aircraft conventionally. Now we come to something which we had before, and Uber says this is, and that's the title of my presentation, what can make this technology disruptive? Not just replacing a combustion engine by an electric motor. Because this is just like keeping aviation like it is. You have some advantages, it will be low noise, but it will not be changing the whole paradigms of the general aviation. So I think which things we need for this development being disruptive. On the technical side, we need the batteries improve so that we get longer range, but we also, and the electric motors, but we also need the computer technology, because all these models in the long run only make sense if we have autonomous flying. Because if we want to have a scaled up number of aircraft flying, not 1 flying by time, if we want to have, like the Uber numbers, hundreds of aircraft flying, there will be no pilot who will be able to do this. So we have to have, in the beginning, autonomous system where you still have a pilot on board, but all the coordination in this operations will, I think, even in the beginning, be done very much autonomous. The pilot will supervising it, and if there is some problem, he can take over and make some extraordinary approaches. But the general operations will be, in my opinion, very automated from the beginning. Otherwise, we'll never get the numbers we need. And then we come to some other factors which are needed there. One is the regulations. So we have to work a lot with FAA, EASA, and CAAC, and the other bodies, but these 3, I think, at the moment are the countries where most of the projects are working on. And there, I come back to this normal, conventional fixed-wing electric flying. In this fixed-wing electric flying, we can do and train the authorities to go the way that later VTOLs can be certified. And we know that the approach which has been taken is very different. Like EASA says, we have a CS VTOL, which is a preliminary system or proposal they released end of last year. But FAA says, okay, we want to certify our VTOL either in Part 23 or in Part 27, like when we want to keep the old classes, which has both advantages, disadvantages. The disadvantage in creating a new class is that if you do so, you have to get also new rules for operation, new rules for maintenance. Otherwise, if you take existing classes, you can take part of these rules and continue with it. So the others having a new category may also slow down the process. On the other hand, you're able to create everything from the scratch and don't have to take the burden of a lot of old rules which will not fit. One other thing for trying out was also mentioned shortly, which is this Ubercopter, which is like, we have so many new things in this urban air mobility that we should try as many of them already now. That we could have, for example, like now with helicopters, trying how ride-sharing in aviation can work, how the cooperation between the aviation and the ground side will work, because the customer still wants to get from A to B. He doesn't want to get from vertiport to vertiport and then get stuck there. So I think this is one of the things which the infrastructure can already started to be built. Sure, then the vertiports have to be built, and they will be different from the heliports. But this is only one part of the infrastructure. And I realized this when this year, right one day before the Uber conference, there was a Gamma Epic infrastructure subcommittee meeting. And there was a study done for NASA, which the conclusion basically is that in all categories, like on the ground, on the water, everywhere, everybody talks on e-mobility. But how do we get all this electricity into our cities? Because that's where we want to operate. And right now, around the world, the politicians, the city planners, they are working on how to get this done. So there has to be built a whole new grid, a whole new production, and they are evaluating where I need how much 1,000 kilowatt hours. And if now they are not much thinking about what's happening in aviation. So if these cities build up their grids for the new cars, for the buses, for all the things which will be electric, for the trucks, there are heavy trucks being converted at this time, then there will be a big problem. The problem will be the new grid is built, but my vertiport is perhaps not near to one of those grid lines, so I start all over again. So this is one of the points in the infrastructure where we have to take care a lot that the electricity has to be produced and has to be implemented. And I think most of you here in the room agree that it's not only it's energy storage, but it's also the energy production. And if we talk about green, there won't be coal miners put into work again. I think the energy will come from other sources. And then there are other challenges like storing the energy. So perhaps fuel cell technology will be necessary, not on the vehicle, but perhaps for storage and for getting the electricity at the point when you need it, at the time when you need it. Why do I think it still will happen? This is a slide I took from Greg Bolt, one of his last presentation, which I think is very nicely saying, okay, when you see how much money is at the moment and will be probably dedicated to this whole field of electric urban air mobility. And this is such a large amount of money. And then if you look at all the companies getting involved there, I'm quite sure we will get the problems of the technology, of the regulations, and also of the infrastructure rule. But there is still one thing, and that's the field I work in, which has to be persuaded, which is the public acceptance, because all this will not work. You know, all my eVTOL taxis will not work if we don't have the customers who want to get in there. And I think if you see how long the discussions has been with the autonomous driving cars. There are so many people who say, no, I will never get in one of these cars without drivers. It takes a long time until it will be done. So we have to work this right now. And I think one of the things where we have to work it is where the Lindbergh Foundation had, I think, a nice idea or interesting idea, which we have to do. We have to work with the future generation, because I think my mother will be very difficult to persuade her to get onto an eVTOL. But if you see how naturally the kids nowadays are using electronic toys, using all kind of electronic things, this is something where we have to get them involved. We have to get them involved in the future planning, and in that this is a natural move on in technology. So I think when we think about public, we have to think about the pilots, because we don't want to fight against the pilots when you go to aviation, because they're in the rule. I'm a pilot myself, and I see when I talk with pilots and they say, but I don't want this there. They're flying over my house, and then I cannot fly with my aircraft like I used to be. So we have to get them on board. We have to get the public on board, because they are the future customers. And we have to get the politicians on board. And if you know, and if you see how few things people in the politics know about aviation in general, you can imagine how little they will know about all these things we talk here. And we have to get the words out in a way that they will understand it. If we get it out like in our talks among each others, it's not good. And it's also not good if you have some of the people in the community who are promising, yeah, we're going to fly our first service in 2020. This will not happen. This cannot happen, because we will not have the rules. We will not have the safety. We will not have the experience. So we have to try to communicate in a serious way the right information in a way how the people can understand it, to make the disruptive change happen. So these are now at the end. I'm nearly at the end of my presentation. We're just coming to some events which are happening where I'm either involved or where I have been, like here at the Cafe Foundation over the years, and see these are the points where it makes sense to go there, because these are the points where you can do networking, where you can see and meet other people. Like there is the same thing like here going in Europe, and there is also in China. There is a lot of things going on, especially on the rules, for example. So I think in unmanned vertical takeoff drone operations for cargo up to 1,000 kilograms, they probably will be much faster than we will be in Europe and we will be in the United States. Because they just released some paper at the beginning of this year from the CAAC that they want to have some trial operations, but it can be even done commercially this year starting. So there is something we have to talk, and we especially, and this is where I see my role, I want to bring the people together, because it does not make any sense if we have developed different rules in Europe, in America, in China. Like if you now have an approach where you would certify a certain VTOL as CS VTOL in a new class in Europe, how do you do the validation when you want to fly the same aircraft in the United States? So there is the E-Flight Forum in China, which we will organize. You see the dates, but you also see the papers, the E-Flight Journal, which is lying at the entrance, and there you have all the dates of these events in there. We have the Aero Friedrichshafen next spring, where we'll expect some more VTOLs, but we're also going to have, and this is in concrete planning, and this is happening right now, all these aircraft are training aircraft which can be in service for electric training. Some of them are already in serial production, others are short before it, others are relatively new. So we will have at least 7, perhaps 10 electric, different types of models, electric aircraft flying there and showing the people that electric aircraft can fly now, and you can use them, for example, for flight training, because you have a limited endurance when they are fully electric, but if you do traffic patterns, it's perfectly doable already right now. Then, like I explained before, there will be again an Aero South Africa, and I will go there again, because it's very interesting if you go to the places where you don't expect anything, And then you see, there is something happening too, and perhaps it's happening in a slightly different way, which can be a kick-off also for us. And that's the end of my presentation. So we have the questions, I think, all together now. No, but I think we will sit and have the questions all together. Thank you.